The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Michael Swango is an American former physician and an admitted serial killer. He is estimated to have been involved in as many as 60 fatal poisonings of patients and colleagues, though he only admitted to causing 4 deaths. He was sentenced in 2000 to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole and is serving that sentence at the ADX Florence Supermax prison near Florence, Colorado. Swango was born on October 21, 1954 in Tacoma, Washington, and raised in Quincy, Illinois, the middle child of Muriel and John Virgil Swango. Rated a genius in high school with a tested IQ of 160, Swango graduated valedictorian in his class and was named High School Student of the Year by the National Merit Scholarship Organization in 1975. He served in the Marine Corps, receiving an honorable discharge in 1980. He then attended Quincy College, now known as Quincy University, and later Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. His troubles were first noticed during his time at SIU. He had bad manners and no bedside manners. As early as that, he had a noticeable fascination with dying patients. Although no one thought much of it at that time, many patients on which Swango was assigned to do checkups ended up coding or suffering life-threatening emergencies. At least 5 of them died. He was also called lazy and was nearly expelled after being caught cheating during his OBGYN rotation. In the end, the school let him graduate if he repeated the coursework. Despite a poor recommendation from SIU, Swango got a surgical internship at Ohio State University in 1983. Nurses began noticing that apparently healthy patients on floors where Swango worked began mysteriously dying with an alarming frequency. One nurse caught him injecting some medicine into a patient who later became strangely ill. The nurses reported their concerns to the administrators but were met with accusations of paranoia. Only a superficial investigation was conducted. But although Swango was cleared by this investigation, he resigned under mysterious circumstances in 1984 and was not asked back to OSU because of concerns about his skills as a surgeon. In July of 1984, Swango returned to Illinois and began working as an emergency medical services technician. Soon, many of the paramedics on staff began noticing that whenever Swango prepared the coffee or brought any food in, several of them usually became violently ill with no apparent cause. In October of that year, he was arrested by the Quincy, Illinois Police Department, who found arsenic and other poisons in his possession. On August 23, 1985, Swango was convicted of aggravated battery for poisoning co-workers at the Adams County Ambulance Service. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. After his release in 1989, Swango forged several legal documents, which he used to reestablish himself as a physician and respected member of society. He forged a fact sheet from the Illinois Department of Corrections that falsified his criminal record, stating that he had been convicted of a misdemeanor for getting into a fist fight with a co-worker and received 6 months in prison, rather than the 5 years for felony poisoning that he served. Most states will not grant a medical license to a violent felon, considering such a conviction to be evidence of unprofessional conduct. He forged a restoration of civil rights letter from the Virginia governor, stating that the governor had decided to restore Swango's right to vote and serve on a jury based on reports from friends and colleagues that he had committed no further crimes after his misdemeanor and was leading an exemplary lifestyle. Swango legally changed his name to David J. Adams to apply for a residency program in West Virginia. Then, in July of 1992, he began working at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A few months later, in December of that year, he made the mistake of attempting to go from there to joining the American Medical Association. The AMA did a more thorough background check than the medical center and discovered a poisoning conviction in Swango's past. The AMA informed the medical center where Swango was working, and the medical center discharged him quietly. The AMA temporarily lost track of Swango, who managed to get employed at the residency program at the Northport Veterans Administration Medical Center, affiliated with the State University of New York Medical School as Stony Brook School of Medicine. This time, he posed as a psychiatry resident, and once again, his patients began dying for no explicable reason. 4 months later, the dean at South Dakota finally learned that Swango had moved to New York and placed a call to the dean of Stony Brook. Swango was discharged in October. This time, the residency director learned from past mistakes and sent a warning about Swango to over 125 medical schools and over 1,000 teaching hospitals across the U.S., effectively blacklisting Swango from getting a medical residency at any American institution. Since the latest Swango incident took place at a Veterans Affairs facility, federal authorities got involved. He dropped out of sight until mid-1994 when the FBI found out he was living in Atlanta and working as a chemist at a computer equipment company's wastewater facility. Soon after the FBI alerted the company, he was fired for lying on his job application. The FBI obtained a warrant charging him with using fraudulent credentials to gain entry to a Veterans Affairs hospital. In November of 1994, he surfaced in Zimbabwe and got a job at a hospital. Again, his patients began dying mysteriously. As a result of suspicions of the medical director there, Dr. Gizeri, Swango was suspended. Because of the failure to perform adequate autopsies, no firm conclusions could be drawn. It wasn't for another year, however, that the poisonings were traced to him, and he was arrested in Zimbabwe. He was charged with poisonings, but he escaped Zimbabwe before his trial date and hid out elsewhere in Africa and Europe. A year and a half later, in March of 1997, he applied for a job at the Royal Hospital in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, using a false resume. In June of 1997, he began a double flight from Africa to Saudi Arabia. He had a layover between flights at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, Illinois, and it was there that he was arrested by federal authorities. Faced with hard evidence of his fraudulent activities and the possibility of an extended inquiry into his time in Zimbabwe, Swango pleaded guilty to defrauding the government in March 1998. In July 1998, he was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. The sentencing judge ordered that Swango not be allowed to prepare or deliver food or have any involvement in preparing or distributing drugs. Although the FBI, the VA, and prosecutors for the Eastern District of New York were convinced Swango was a serial killer, they knew it would be difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. They also knew that they had a limited amount of time to amass that proof. Federal inmates must serve at least 85% of their sentences before being eligible for time off with good behavior, meaning that they likely had only 3 years to prove that Swango was indeed a murderer. They feared that if they couldn't get enough evidence to keep Swango behind bars, he was likely to kill again. The government used this time to amass a dossier of Swango's crimes. As part of that investigation, prosecutors exhumed the bodies of 3 patients and found poisonous chemicals in them. They also found evidence that Swango paralyzed patient Baron Harris with an injection of what was supposedly a sedative. The sedative caused him to lapse into a coma, and Harris died on November 9, 1993. Additionally, prosecutors found evidence that Swango lied about the death of Cynthia Ann McGee, a patient he treated during his internship at OSU. Swango claimed she suffered heart failure. He had killed her by giving her a potassium injection that stopped her heart. On July 11, 2000, Less than a week before he was due to be released from prison on the fraud charge, federal prosecutors on Long Island filed a criminal complaint charging Swango with 3 counts of murder, 1 count of assault, and 1 count each of false statements, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. At the same time, Zimbabwean authorities charged him with poisoning 7 patients, 5 of whom died. A week before the indictment was handed up, FBI agents interviewed Swango in prison. They told him that on the day he was due to be released, he would be extradited to Zimbabwe to face charges of murder and attempted murder. Knowing that he would likely face the death penalty for his crimes in Zimbabwe, Swango began talks for a plea agreement. Eventually, prosecutors agreed to take the death penalty and extradition off the table in return for Swango accepting a sentence of life in prison without parole. Swango was formally indicted on July 17, 2000 and pleaded not guilty. On September 6, he pleaded guilty to the 3 murder counts, as well as counts of wire fraud and mail fraud. Had he not done so, he would have faced the possibility of the death penalty in both countries. At his sentencing hearing, Swango admitted to causing 3 murders, lying about his role in causing a 4th death, and lying about his 1985 conviction. Swango was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life without parole. He is incarcerated at ADX Florence near Florence, Colorado, at his own request, for the fear of being attacked if he were placed in general population. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twysted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!